Hello again, it's Miss D. Today, we will be looking at how we can compare and order decimal numbers when they appear in various forms. So let's get started by looking at slide A. I want you to take a moment and tell me all you can about the number below. How many different ways can you write this value? So go ahead and pause to answer this question. When you're ready, go ahead and unpause. So what did you write? What were the different ways you came up with? Did you write it as a fraction, as 9 and 4/10? Maybe you change that up a little bit by writing 9 and 40 hundredths. Maybe that led you to write it in a decimal form as 9 and 40 hundredths. Did you write it using words as well, 9 and 4/10? Maybe you used a $sign to show it as money. Or did you try maybe to write it all as a fraction, 94/10? I hope you wrote it some of the ways that you see here. All right, let's take what we learned from this slide and go ahead to the next slide. So we're going to jump ahead to slide F. So here it wants you to arrange the decimal number flashcards in order from least to greatest. Again, make sure you're paying attention to the order. It wants it from least to greatest. Drag the cards above so that they are in order from least to greatest. Explain how you determined this order. So go ahead and pause and answer this question. When you're ready, go ahead and unpause. All right. So did you notice you had to kind of figure out a way to compare these numbers? They were all in different forms, right? We had here decimal, we had here some numbers and words. Here we had a fraction. Here we had a decimal and tenths. We had again numbers and words with a fraction. So when we are trying to compare these, it might be helpful to use a format where they're all kind of the same. So writing them all in decimals, writing them all in fractions might be a little bit helpful. So I'm going to show you what I did here, which was to write them in using decimals and including a digit in both the tenths and the hundredths place. So the first one was already in that format of 17 hundredths. For 3/10, while we would normally write it as 0.3, I added a 0 here because we know that 3/10, right, if I write it as a fraction, as we looked in the previous lesson together, 3/10 is equivalent to 30 hundredths. And I wrote this fraction as a decimal as 34 hundredths. This decimal was 2/10, but I know 20 hundredths is equivalent to that. This one was pretty much ready for us, right? 13 hundredths, so I just had to write that in decimal. And 4/10, similar to the ones that we saw before, like 3/10 and 2/10, I found the equivalent fraction of 40 hundredths and wrote it as decimal. So now let's go ahead and order these numbers again from least to greatest. So you should notice that 13 hundredths is the smallest. Then we have 17 hundredths. Then after that is 20 hundredths. Then 30 hundredths. Then 34 hundredths. And 40 hundredths. Is that what you got? Great. If not, think about what I did here to help me get to this step. Again, I changed all of these cards into the same unit. I chose to write them in hundredths because some numbers are in tenths, but not all of them are in tenths. So I can't write 17 hundredths in tenths. So that's why I chose to put them in the lowest unit, which would be hundredths. All right, let's take what we learned from this slide and go ahead to the next slide. So I'm skipping to G here, And again, it wants us to plot and label the decimal numbers on the number line. So it's these same numbers that we looked at before. But you'll notice that the number line here has both fractions here on top and decimals on the bottom. So before we start filling in the location of these numbers, I want us to kind of study this number line a little bit more. So remember, on the bottom we're counting by tenths, but the tick marks represent hundredths. So if I go ahead and start counting at least this first section here, I have 1/10, 11 hundredths, 12 hundredths, 13 hundredths, 14 hundredths, 15 hundredths, 16 hundredths, 17 hundredths, 18 hundredths, 19 hundredths. I could say 20 hundredths, or I could say 2/10, then 21 hundredths, and so forth. But on the top, I'm counting, I'm using fractions, and here I have 1/10, just like I have 1/10 here. We say the names the same way, but they look a little bit different. So here we have 11 hundredths, 12 hundredths, 13 hundredths, 14 hundredths, 15 hundredths, 16 hundredths, 17 hundredths, 18 hundredths, 19 hundredths. We can say 20 hundredths, but we have 2/10 here. And then we'll continue, 21 hundredths, 22 hundredths, and so forth. So why don't you pause and plot the points on the number line below. When you're ready, unpause. All right, so let's go ahead and start plotting these points. So the first point is going to be on 17 hundredths. So we already had that labeled, so I'm going to put my little mark over there. Then we have 3/10. Well, I see 3/10 right there, so that one's easy to plot. Right, some of them we notice are a lot easier to plot, right? The 2/10, the 4/10. So maybe we could go ahead and plot those. Makes it a lot easier if we have those points labeled for us, doesn't it? Okay, so we still have to plot 34 hundredths. So here we have 3/10, so this would be 31 hundredths, 32 hundredths, 33 hundredths, 34 hundredths. And we still have to plot 13 hundredths. That one's kind of easy since it's labeled for us as well. So you'll notice that some of the numbers were a lot easier to plot, right? Your 3/10, your 2/10, your 4/10, because those are labeled for us. But the other points, 17/10, 34 hundredths, and 13 hundredths, are a little more challenging because we have to count out those tick marks. But if you think back to those other number lines we saw before, this number line is a lot better than having it from 0 to 1 and trying to plot all these points. So again, when you're plotting points on a number line and your numbers are decimals and they have tenths and hundredths, it's best to create a number line like the one we've seen today, which is the number line that has labels in tenths and tick marks that show the hundredths. Well, I hope this video on how you can compare and order decimal numbers on number lines as well as in various forms was helpful. I'll see you next time.